Hey everybody, how's it going? Let's talk about your home recording studio. Today, we are gonna look at a side-by-side comparison of two very hot audio interfaces on the market today. And those are the SSL 2 Plus and the MOTU M4. Now, kind of full disclosure here, I've never really done anything quite like this before, so I'm not 100% sure of how to approach it. So if there's anything big that I leave out that you still wanna know, let us know down in the comments below, and I'll make an effort to address any outstanding issues. Also, there are already some really good resources out there on YouTube about these two interfaces. I will link to a couple of videos from Julian Krause down below in the description, and a couple of videos from Podcastage, who have both covered these two interfaces in very good detail. I've also done a video each on these, where on each of them I've recorded an entire music project from scratch. So I'll link those down there as well. But as far as a side-by-side comparison, let's take a look here. I guess the first thing to note here is that this is not really an apples to apples comparison between these two interfaces. The SSL 2 Plus is a 2-in, 4-out, and the MOTU M4 is a 4-in, 4-out. So they're not exactly competing for the exact same thing here. They're kind of two different classes of interface, you could say. But they both do feature two combo mic input preamps here. So they both have the combo XLR, TRS, TS, so you can input mic level, line level, or instrument level. And that's true for both inputs on both interfaces, so that's great. The MOTU M4 goes a little step farther and actually gives you a couple of extra line inputs on the back. You've got inputs 3 and 4 here. No such thing on the SSL 2 Plus. Now they both do have 4 outputs. The MOTU M4 has 4 balanced TRS line outputs, and the SSL 2 Plus has 2 balanced TRS line outputs, and for whatever reason, 2 unbalanced RCA outputs. I can't say I'm a fan of that decision. Why not just put 2 more balanced line outputs here? They both have MIDI 5-pin in and out, which is great. They both have USB Type-C jacks on the back of them. And they both have the Kensington locks, just in case your audio interfaces like to grow legs and walk away. Now you can kind of see a little bit of a size comparison between the two of them. They're about, the SSL 2 Plus has got a little bit wider of a footprint, and it definitely has a deeper footprint than the MOTU here. 2 Plus is kind of a big chunky boy. Now the 2 Plus is in this kind of desktop format, this everything on the top kind of layout, while the MOTU adheres to the more common everything on the front kind of layout, nothing on the top. All right, to improve our viewing here, I have rigged up some very fancy pieces of rubber back carpet and prop these up a little bit. So the SSL 2 Plus comes with a USB Type-C to USB Type-A cable, and it also comes with a USB C to C cable. So just in case your computer, laptop, whatever, only has Type-C connectivity, SSL's got you covered. So let's plug in the SSL real quick. All right, so we get a quick little light show here on our LED input gain indicators. And the USB connectivity light comes on, stays on. Now let's go ahead and plug in the M4. And we get a little MOTU logo splash screen there. And then we get our 4 ins and 4 outs display here on the LCD screen. So number of inputs and outputs are going to be pretty much the primary thing that's going to help guide you in choosing the right interface for you. Pretty much impossible to work around not having enough inputs or outputs. So I think that's kind of number 1 decision point. Number 2 is the connectivity type, I believe. So both of these, USB, and both of them use Type-C. And after that, I think the drivers and how they kind of cooperate and behave themselves on your system, on your computer, is going to be very important as well. And I have to say, I have not had any troubles with either of these. Now, I've used the M4 more extensively. It's been over about the last year or so what I use to capture my voice and the stereo output from other interfaces for all the videos I make on my channel. I've been very happy with it, and it has been rock solid and has never failed me. The SSL2 Plus, it's also stable. I have had no troubles with it. I just haven't used it nearly as much, so I don't have quite as much perspective. But no troubles at all. They've both been rock solid. They've both been great for me. Now, kind of the other side to the software portion of what comes with these interfaces is latency. And latency, if you are doing anything music related, anything timing related, then the latency and how low you can get that latency is extremely important. And I'm happy to say both of these interfaces perform admirably. I would say they both fall into the average category as far as latency. I've recorded music projects through both of them and monitored entirely through software, and at no point did they struggle or anything like that. So I came up with this Excel spreadsheet, put it on a chart here, so we could look at comparative latencies between these two interfaces and RME Fireface UCX, which is what I typically use in my own home studio. At 128 sample buffer size, which I consider kind of a good all-around setting. It's not as fast and low of latency as any interface can generate, but it's also unlikely to cause troubles with your computer. And this chart is showing round trip, even though the drivers will report input latency and output latency separately. It's just easier to chart when I add them together and consider the whole round trip, input plus output. So the orange line represents the data points of the MOTU M4 at various sample rates. So the first data point is at 44.1 kilohertz, and then 48 kilohertz, 96 kilohertz, 192 kilohertz, and then just to push it as far as I could, I did another data point of 192 kilohertz at a 64 sample buffer. The orange line represents how the MOTU M4 fared. It was between 11 and 12 milliseconds of round trip latency, which is, that's not great. And at that same setting at 44.1, the SSL2 Plus came in just under 10 milliseconds. And then just as comparison, my RME comes in at 7.4 milliseconds round trip. Kind of smokes them both, but hey, RME is known for their Windows drivers, their low latency. That's one of the reasons why I love them so much. Now at 48 kilohertz, we can see the MOTU is still lagging behind here with a 10.7 millisecond round trip. SSL has a 9.67 millisecond round trip. At 96 kilohertz, things get considerably faster, just about twice as fast for everybody here. And the M4 is looking at a 6 millisecond round trip. The SSL is looking at about 5.5, 5 1/3. And then at the highest sample rates, the MOTU actually laps the 2 Plus with a 3.8 millisecond round trip versus 4.67 millisecond round trip. And then things didn't change a whole lot for the SSL2 Plus at 192,000 samples per second. When I dropped the buffer size down to 64 samples, we're looking at 4.33 millisecond round trip. And then the MOTU did improve quite a bit for a 2.7 millisecond round trip. But hopefully that gives you just kind of like a quick overview of how the latencies compare. They're both very usable, and I think they're both competitive with all the other interfaces I've used. Now, another point of comparison is just the build quality, the overall just kind of feel of using them. Now, the SSL is plastic all the way around on the sides and has a metal faceplate here. And it's the other way around here. The MOTU is metal all the way around with a plastic faceplate. All of the knobs on both interfaces feel terrific. They have buttery smooth travel. There's very little to no wobble on them. I think the buttons, or the knobs, are all the way around terrific on both of these interfaces. They're just a pleasure to interact with. On the other hand, the buttons on the SSL2 Plus, I think, are all pretty terrible. They're just not very fun to kind of push and interact with. They just don't really feel very good. They all wobble. They're kind of scratchy when you push them in and out. And that goes for every single button on the face of this thing, the 4K buttons. Now the buttons on the face of the M4, they are all very low profile, so they don't have very much travel. But they still are satisfying to push, satisfying to interact with. They do just wobble a little bit, like they don't fit 100% perfectly in their little cutouts on the faceplate. But since they're low profile, you don't really feel that when you interact with them. As far as the quality of the jacks, absolutely no problems with any of the jacks. They all feel nice and secure. They hold on to cables tightly, but not so tightly that I'm afraid that they're going to tear the cable apart as I try to pull it out. I've had no issues, both with the 1/4 inch and the XLR on both interfaces. It's just satisfying to click a cable into place. The fit is just about perfect. So I think they both do really well there. As far as metering goes, the 2 Plus has 5-segment LED indicators to let you know how strong your input signal is coming in. So that'll give you some guidance as you're adjusting your input gain. That's nice, but it has no monitoring on the output at all. So maybe if you're troubleshooting a problem, you don't really get any insight into the output section. Now the MOTU M4 has this beautiful 1-inch LCD screen here, and this is just unique in this price point for audio interfaces. I'm not aware of any other audio interface near this price that has such a beautiful full color LED. It's high resolution, it looks beautiful. You get input monitoring and output monitoring. I think it's highly useful. It's definitely highly attractive. I really, really like that. Now, as far as software that these come with, the MOTU M4 comes with Digital Performer Lite, and in that DAW, there are some soft synths and plugins and things that it comes with, and it comes with a license for Ableton Live Lite. Now, the SSL 2 Plus also comes with Ableton Live Lite, but also Pro Tools First, and it also has a bundle from Native Instruments, which includes, what is it? I gotta look on the box to remember, but it's Complete Start and Hybrid Keys. Comes with 1.5 gigs of samples from Loop Cloud, and what I think is just the clear winner of just about any audio interface I've used as far as the software that comes with it is a couple of SSL native plugins, VST effects. It comes with Vocal Strip 2 and Drum Strip 2, both are just Drum Strip, not 2, both of which I used on the project for the video that I did with it, and I was really impressed with both of them. Now, SSL has also, in the meantime, released another couple of VST plugins that you can get for free with this interface, or if you already own it. Now, the downside to the plugins that come with the SSL 2 Plus is that they rely on an iLock. So it's another $50 investment, and then all the pain of going through all the obnoxious iLock authentication stuff, which I absolutely hate. I've had an iLock for years, so it wasn't an added expense for me, but if you don't already have one, to use free plugins, to have to go drop $50 on a stupid little dongle just so you can use the plugins, it's kind of disappointing, honestly. Now, I think just about the only other thing left to do is let's take a couple of microphones, let's plug them into these things, and let's kind of hear them side by side and see if we can't draw any conclusions about how they might sound different. Okay, so what I've got here is a matched stereo pair of AKG C414 XLS microphones. These are relatively neutral sounding microphones, factory matched stereo pair, so they're going to sound as similar as two microphones could sound. I have two of the same cables, a couple of Proco XLR to XLR, so it should be a pretty fair fight of what I'm feeding to each interface. So this one's plugged into the SSL 2 Plus, this one is plugged into the MOTU M4. So I'll switch over here, start turning up the gain until we get a signal, and we'll hear what it sounds like through the 2 Plus.
Test, 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 1, 2, test, 1, 2, test, 1, 2, test, 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 1, 2. Okay, there we go. Getting a nice strong signal here. Not clipping or anything, so let's see what it takes to clip it. Test, 1, 2, test, 1, 2. Okay, there we go. And we'll back it back down so, we could hear it distort there. So we have some gain to spare. Now this is a large diaphragm condenser microphone. Typically having enough gain with these is not a problem. If anything, headroom is going to be the problem. But it looks like, just judging by where I am on the dial, I am maybe about 6 inches away from the mic, speaking a little loudly, which I tend to do when I wear headphones, and get a nice solid signal. So let's kick on the 4K switch and hear that real quick. All right, there we go. So the 4K, so let's try it without. It definitely made it louder, and okay, it's back on, and so yeah, there's just a little bit more presence, I would say. Somewhere in that maybe 4 to 6 kilohertz kind of range, somewhere in there. There may be a little something up a little higher, but that's just what I'm hearing real time over headphones. Okay, let's switch over and let's hear the MOTU M4. I'm going to turn my volume down by just turning all the way to the playback, and that should mute me as I go away farther. Test, 1, 2, test, 1, 2. There we go. Okay, get a nice strong signal. Wow. I would say even around the same percentage of gain, like that sounds substantially louder than the SSL did. So let me back off a little bit. So we've got, I would say this preamp has got a lot more gain on tap than the 2 Plus does. So let's turn it up. Let's see what it takes to clip it. Test, 1, 2, test, 1, 2. Ooh, yeah. Wait, where did I get feedback? So we've got ample gain here to drive and even overdrive the preamp. So that's actually kind of surprising. I would say that the MOTU M4 has got a lot more gain on tap. Okay, let's do the same thing. I'm just going to turn myself down by turning from input to playback, and I should be disappearing and going, gone.
Okay, yeah, that's actually a little bit surprising. Now is one other thing that we can take a look at here. So we took a look at the inputs. Let's take a listen to the outputs. While I can't really speak to the headphone outputs, I know we're just gonna have to go and watch Julian Krause's videos about these interfaces, where he gives a really good idea of what you can expect with headphones of different resistance, of different ohms. I always use a pair of Sennheiser HD 380 Pros, and I believe these are somewhere in the 56 ohm, so they're relatively low impedance. And man, I tried to find replacement ear cups for these things a couple of days ago, and I can't find them, but yeah, these things need it. Anyways, I've got a pair of HD 650s on the way for Christmas, but I don't have them yet, so I can't really test those with these. But all I can say is with a pair of 380 Pros, I have never had a problem getting ample amounts of headphone volume. I can always hear myself very well as I'm tracking even loud instruments. I can hear myself, I can hear the mix, and I have room to spare on the volume dial. Now, with a higher impedance pair of headphones, I'm not exactly sure if that would hold true, but what we can test here real quick is the output volume that would be sent to your interface, or I'm sorry, to your monitors, your speakers, through the main outputs. So if I flip over here and take a look, so this is my control panel for the RME. This very top row up here is what we want to pay attention to. These are the hardware inputs. You can see this analog 3 is dancing because that's where my microphone is plugged in that I'm speaking into right now. But the SSL 2 Plus is plugged in on analog 5 and 6. That's the stereo left and right. And the MOTU M4 is plugged in analog 7 and 8. That's its stereo left and right. So I'm just going to send some music from my computer out the playback and out the main outputs. And let's dial the volume back on both of these. And let's just kind of get an idea of how hard it's going to drive these line inputs on my RME. That'll give us an idea of how much kind of power we've got going out to what would normally plug into your speakers. Okay, so I'm just going to send media player, and let's take a look at the sound options real quick. And right now we are going to play through the SSL 2 Plus. So I'm just going to hit play and start dialing up the volume, and let's see what it maxes out at on the meters.
Fall out of a cab door, drag yourself across the sidewalk. Home is only so far away.
Okay, so it looked like that was just coming really close to just about 0 dB, and that was with the volume absolutely cranked there at the end. So let's try the same thing with the M4. I'll switch over, and I want to go out 1 and 2 on the MOTU M4 now. And let's pick it up where we left it off here, and let's watch the meters and the dial here. Okay, so yeah, we can see pretty clearly that the MOTU, not only does it have hotter preamps, more gain available in the preamps, but also hotter output. So I didn't even have to get it turned up all the way in order to drive well past clipping. Line inputs that are set just the same on my interface there. So they should be the same sensitivity on all 4 of those line inputs. The 2 that were driven by the outputs of the SSL2 Plus. Didn't clip even when the SSL2 Plus was cranked all the way up. The two driven by the M4 did clip even before I got to 100%, so that shows me that there's just more output volume coming out of the M4. Now, as one final thing here that I can think of to talk about today, and that is the cost, the price of these. Now, both of these are kind of scarce on the market right now. It's a little hard to find these in stock anywhere, but when you do find them in stock, the MOTU M4 runs for about $220 to maybe $240 US. And that's for 4 inputs, 4 outputs. The SSL2 Plus retails for about $280 for 2 fewer inputs and 2 kind of useless outputs out of the 4. So strictly from a hardware perspective, I would say hands down the M4 is a much better value per dollar, feature per dollar. But then you start to add in the software, and the quality of the software plugins that comes with the SSL2 Plus are just excellent. And that does help kind of even the scales out a little bit. I still think that the 2 Plus is a little bit overpriced for what it is. I think it's a wonderful interface. I can't really find much, if anything, wrong with it, but it is more expensive than any other interface that has 2 ins and 4 outs, at least that I'm aware of. So to wrap this up, I don't think that you're going to go wrong. I don't think that you are going to be disappointed in either of these interfaces. If you're having trouble deciding between these or their very close brethren, which would be the SSL2 and the MOTU M2, I think these are very high quality interfaces. I think they sound great. And just like when comparing any 2 interfaces, I don't really like to declare one better than the other because typically they're kind of going for different things. And they're always just going to sound so very similar. Now, these do have a little bit of their own personality, just like any interface does. They do sound just a teeny tiny bit different, but we're talking kind of a few percentage points, out of 100 of difference between the two. Now, you do get extra tone shaping with the 4K, but this honestly isn't anything that you couldn't achieve with some EQ and a saturation plugin with any interface, but it is kind of nice to just kerplunk and just have it right there just whenever you feel like it. Add a little extra sparkle to something just at the push of a button. That is kind of nice. And the 2 Plus does have just a little bit of attitude, a little bit of character, maybe in its mid-range there. I would consider the MOTU M4 a little more clean and articulate, but again, this is splitting hairs. Like, I can say these things out loud, but I'm sure that I would never pass a blind, a double-blind test of trying to tell the difference of something recorded with one versus the other. Pretty much all interfaces, especially in this price range, are going to sound very, very similar because that's what they're designed to do. They're designed to be clean and transparent. So clean and clear, low distortion, low noise is really the point. And both of these achieve that. You could tell on both of them that once we drove it up past a certain point, they were no longer clean and clear. And since we're listening to them through analog outputs here, it distorted. But if we were doing that through the USB and into a track, then it probably would clip instead and not sound, kind of pleasantly fuzzy. It would just sound horrible and, digital clicks and pops and everything. So my not so hot take here is that they're both great interfaces. Neither is going to let you down. I think either one you choose is going to be a good choice. But hopefully going through all the points we went through today will help you make a more informed decision. If you're trying to choose between these, just don't stress over it too much, all right? Well, thank you so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it. I think that will do it for me this time, and I will see you all again next time.